Welcome to Do You Approve This Groove, a project where two old friends dive headfirst into the 500 greatest albums of all time and beyond. We're going to relive them like we're trading the ultimate mixtape, one legendary record at a time. Each episode, we take a deep dive into iconic albums, rediscover their magic, and see if they hold up after all of these years. We'll rank each album and open up our hot takes for discussion. So whether you're hearing it for the first time or for the 100th, whether you agree or disagree, we're turning the volume up and bringing you along for the ride. In this episode, we'll count down albums 490 through 481. We'll explore some early punk and some dance floor bangers. At least one of these 10 albums is a real killer.
Hey, welcome back to Do You Approve This Groove? I'm Kyle, he's Tyler. This is episode 2 of us counting down Rolling Stone's top 500 albums of all time. Tyler.
It sure is.
How's it going?
It's going well. Hanging out Monday night. My voice is going to be a little bit weird in this one. I've got a cold thanks to both of my daughters. We're investing heavily in Kleenex this week. And it's really paying off. I think my dividends are growing.
Yeah.
How are you?
This is about the same. Yeah, we've got the sickness going through the house. We had a busy weekend, a little bit of travel this weekend, and then it was nice to have the day off today to recuperate a little bit. But now I'm feeling a little worn down. But we're here. We're gonna do it.
So we're gonna start off at album 490, getting right back to it this week. This album is Linda Ronstadt's "Heart Like a Wheel." It was released on November 19th of 1975 on Capitol Records. It's produced by Peter Asher, released in the US of A. Comes in at 31 minutes and 40 seconds. A nice quick hitter. This was nice to get this one under the belt, to kind of go after it. So, Aya, what were your first impressions of Linda Ronstadt's Heart Like a Wheel?
You reminded me that it was so short, that it was 30 something minutes long. And that I appreciated that, having, some of the longer albums, the anthologies that we had going through this week. But I relied really heavily on my rubric for this one because I didn't have much of a connection to this. It was good. And I had to go out of my way to remind myself to appreciate it because it was good. But personally, I didn't feel much for it. It was very well written. I think the songs were arranged well and it was well written. But I think saying that they were well written is an interesting point because I think aren't a lot of the songs on this covers, if not all of them?
So either covers or written for this album, and this record. Yes.
Right.
Again, excuse my ignorance. I know the name for sure, know some songs, but I thought she was more of a singer-songwriter artist.
Yeah, like a Joni Mitchell sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah. So it was interesting to check this out, and like you said, not see her name as a writer, which, doesn't take away from the art, but...
Yeah,
yes.
And I mean, personally, I didn't know any of these songs, the original versions of these songs, so... To me, they might as well have been original songs, and in that capacity, they were, even if they are cover songs, they were interestingly arranged and produced. They sounded good. The performances were good. Her voice is awesome. I really enjoyed her voice, and it was pleasing to listen to. I enjoyed the album as a whole, but I didn't, like I said, I didn't really connect to it all that much.
Yeah, so I gave this one a quick once through a couple weeks ago, and then checked it out more fully a couple days ago. I want to say that the tracks that stood out to me were obviously "You're No Good," which leads this album off. "When Will I Be Loved" is another. That's an Everly Brothers song that I think most humans would recognize. And then the last song, "You Can Close Your Eyes," is a James Taylor song, and that one sounds like a James Taylor song, and sounded good to my ear. But yeah, my notes included what we talked about. I didn't know that she didn't write her own songs. On my second, like you, I think my first listen, I kind of just let it go. And once was enough, but I listened to it again, and I was really impressed actually by the track 4, "The Dark End of the Street." I don't know, that one just got me. I was going through Wegmans grocery shopping, and that one stuck with me enough to where it impressed me enough where I was like, thinking this should be the album title. Like that is in my mind was a way better song than the Heart Like a Wheel song, which I thought was just quiet and boring and not for me.
Yeah.
I really like that one.
Hmm.
Dark End of the Street was a good one. Um, yeah, I this is another one that like I don't have a lot of history with, don't have a connection to, other than she can sing.
Yeah.
Homegirl can sing, so most songs are going to sound good with her on it. But
Yeah.
um,
And this was
yeah,
the only album of hers that I've ever listened to through. And I know it said this is what her fourth album, fourth or fifth, something like it.
oh yeah, that's a good
It's
one. I didn't catch
certainly
that in the notes.
it's certainly not her first album, but this is the only one that I know of, and I don't know her back catalog, her older history, but I think from what I understand, she did a lot more in the country music realm earlier on, and it was interesting to hear some of that influence. Like one of the songs, and I can't remember the title of the song off the top of my head, but one of the songs won the Grammy that year for the best country song, performance by a female artist, something like that. And even though I wouldn't call it a country album by any means, but
Sure.
you could hear the country influence just kind of sprinkled in a lot of places throughout the album.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I'm looking at some of the notes right now. This was her first album to hit number one on the Billboard 200. It spent 4 weeks at number one. It says it spent 51 weeks on the album charts. Now that can be influenced by a lot of things, but I mean a year on the charts it's stuck with you.
Yeah.
So that's pretty awesome. She was nominated for 4 Grammys. She won, as you mentioned, Best Country Vocal Performance for the track "I Can't Help It If I'm Still in Love with You,"
Yeah.
which was written by and cover. I think it was a cover written by Hank Williams.
Mm.
So that one was definitely familiar to people, and they liked what she did with it. In the first ranking by Rolling Stone, oh no, sorry, not in the first one. This album ranked 490 in 2020. That's where we're at. Obviously, duh. This was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame, though, which I thought was kind of interesting. Haven't seen that note before. A lot of people on this. A lot of people worked on this album. I mean, this was definitely a session musician's album.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. I'm looking at that. 2 times platinum in the United States, double platinum. So hey, shout out, Linda.
Yeah.
You did it. What'd you rank this thing?
I gave it a 3, which is actually, so I listened to this back in October, which was, 3 or 4 months ago now. And I gave it a 2 when I listened to it back then. And then this week, in preparation for this, I went back and re-listened to it, and I thought, it was better than a 2. So I gave it a 3. Again, heavily relying on that rubric this time around.
Yeah, I gave this one a 3. I thought it was good. I mean, like the big songs speak for themselves. You can't go wrong with those. I'd keep coming back for some of those. I mean, we're gonna hear "You're No Good Forever," and it probably is gonna be that version. That's the one I think of when I hear about it.
Yeah.
Or when I think about it.
For sure.
Yeah. So that was Linda Ronstadt's "Heart Like a Wheel." All right.
Hey, it's Kyle, just jumping in real quick to ask, do you approve this groove? Let us know in the comments. Give us a quick thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and join the conversation.
Next on the list at 489 is Phil Spector and various artists, because he's, really just the producer on these. Back to Mono, which is a collection that spans from 1958 to 1969. This album, if I guess you can call it an album, it's more of a collection. What's the big word? An anthology. There you go. It's an anthology. It is long at over, let me do the math, 2 hours and 25 minutes. Over 3 hours and 25 minutes. This is a 3-hour long venture. You will not lose respect from us if you're following along and you don't make it through all 3.5 hours. Full disclosure, I certainly didn't. It's hard to find. I listened to some other stuff. There's a lot of songs on this list that I already knew and recognized from my personal history with classic radio. Well, not classic. You know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, Kyle, what did you think?
Well, I think first of all, do we talk about Phil Spector here? because he sucked. Like as a person, I kind of had a
I
hard
mean-
time listening to this, just knowing the kind of person he was. But I think if we,
Yeah.
I think if we spent a lot of time talking about the personal lives of a lot of the people on this list, we're going to be spending a lot of time doing that. So
We wouldn't get very far.
no,
Yeah.
no, but
But yeah, if in case you're living under a rock, Phil Spector killed someone. So I mean, there we go.
yeah, yeah,
That was in 2003, way after this. Now that
Right.
being said, who knows what happened before 2003? Who knows? Maybe a lot could have happened. And again, I'm just skimming the surface here. Some other people probably know a lot more than we do. But yeah, again, full disclosure: Phil Spector killed a guy. Still on the list. Great,
woman.
thanks,
Kill-
Phil.
yeah, killed a woman.
Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
killed a woman. Yes.
So
Yeah.
I mean, as far as the anthology itself goes, so I did suffer through the entire thing, and it wasn't easy to find. But I did. Yeah, I went through all 3 discs, and again, just like with the Linda Ronstadt album, I relied heavily on the rubric again because of the lack of connection. Like, I don't want to give something a bad score just because I personally don't connect with it. So that being said, there's a lot of really cool stuff on here. Getting beyond my own personal opinion about the music, like it's not something that I would choose to listen to again. It's something that, like, if I was hanging out and it came on the radio or something, I would be like, oh yeah, I know that song. That's a Phil Spector recorded song, that sort of thing. But what I thought was awesome about it was the way it highlighted his wall of sound recording technique, right? Like the first disc of this album starts early, or this anthology starts early in his career, and you can hear song by song kind of the progression of that sound, of what became the wall of sound through that first disc. And it's, by like 2/3 of the way through the disc, you get a really good picture of what he was able to accomplish with his recording. That being said, I got it by the end of the first disc. I didn't really need 2 more discs of it to get it. Like, not to say that there wasn't good music on those other discs, but to me, Phil Spector's contribution in large part was that wall of sound, and that first disc really highlighted that wall of sound technique really well.
So you weren't even whelmed. You were just kind of underwhelmed.
I was down the middle again. Yeah.
So maybe just whelmed. You were whelmed.
I was sufficiently whelmed.
Sufficiently whelmed. All right. Yeah. So all right. This anthology reminded me of the group The Crystals. I mean, they were definitely on a heater in the 1962 or so. The song "He's a Rebel" stood out to me. I had not heard that song in so long, and it just brought me back. The melody in that is the vocal melody in that is so cool. It's like at one point there's like they just sing like an arpeggio up and down, and it's just really fun. I really like that one. There's a couple other ones that surprised me I forgot about. This song "Never Too Young to Get Married." I was like, okay. Point of order. Sometimes you are too young to be married. But anyways, this was teenagers in the 60s. I get it. One of the songs that surprised me on this one that I didn't realize was a Phil Spector song is "River Deep Mountain High" by Ike and Tina Turner. Again, didn't know. That was later. So this anthology, like we said, really spans like the very late 50s through the 60s. But I in my opinion, the quality of the stuff kind of trails off towards the end. Mm-hmm. And I would venture to guess 10 years of just cranking out this stuff. I mean, and this is 3.5 hours of the best of it. So there are X amount of hours of other recordings that didn't make it on this list. So, I mean, this is just insane. I mean, the volume of stuff. They can't all be bangers. They just can't. So, no shade on that one. This anthology was released in 1991, prior to his run-in with the law.
Run-in, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I would imagine that this was probably much more of a collector's item in, like we would see some of those You remember back in the 90s, every once in a while on cable, you would see those box set commercials and, order those mix albums and stuff like that. This seems to me like it was put together for one of those sorts of things. It certified gold in the U.S. at over 500,000 units sold. So like I said, this was an afterthought, right? I mean, the real records being sold were the original records. What did you rank this one?
I gave it a 3 again. Relying on that rubric, I didn't have a whole lot of connection, which I think one person who deserves a lot of credit for this more than Phil Spector is Jack Nietzsche, who is he arranged a lot of these songs and was the producer for a lot of these songs, and I had a lot of respect for him after listening through this. But as a whole, I there's a lot of interesting stuff going on here. I didn't have a ton of connection to it, so I went with a 3 again.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, it's tough. There's so much of it; it's hard to consider the whole thing. I mean, the rankings probably are the least important thing that we're doing, but a 3. There were some songs that I would put way higher than that. There's some really good ones. One thing that I did notice that I thought was interesting, we mentioned the timeline of his personal life. When Rolling Stone released their first ranking list in 2003, which I can only assume was before he was arrested. I have to assume that because this was the 64th ranked album of the 500 in 2003. So, How the Mighty Have Fallen. Deservedly so.
That is... it's a precipitous drop.
Yes, probably. I would venture to guess probably the biggest drop of all the albums that were on the original list and then are still on the original list, because some of them dropped off completely. But that's a drop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Anything else on Phil Spector and this great one? I mean, we talked about the Ronettes already before. They feature pretty prominently in this one, but I think we covered it.
Yep. Good to go.
Sweet. Album 488 is The Stooges' self-titled album, The Stooges, released on August 5th of 1969 on Elektra Records. This quick hitter, again, comes in at 34 minutes and 34 seconds. They get in, they get out, those Stooges. This was produced by John Cale out of the USA. This was their debut album. Kyle, do you like The Stooges record?
There's a period of time, just thinking about the sound of this album, right? Like I kept seeing the term proto-punk thrown around with this album, how it's kind of an early example of what, kicked off the punk movement, but it was mixed with this 60s psychedelia sound too. And I feel like there's this period of time where a sound is cool. Like it's like an authentic, real new sound, but then at some point eventually that sound becomes popular enough that it kind of becomes a caricature. The sound becomes a caricature, and it's not that sound anymore. It's people trying to sound like that sound. And this album, the Stooges album, is very much in the cool period of this sound. And I really got a lot. I'm not a big punk fan. I'm not a big, especially the more straightforward punk stuff, the hardcore stuff, that sort of thing, the 3 chords over and over. Not a big fan of it, but this, I liked the influence of psychedelia in it. It had kind of that anti-authority, rule-breaking sort of punk attitude. And even though it was kind of repetitive at a lot of places, I thought the lead guitar brought a lot to it that added to it, made it interesting again. The one thing that I went back and forth. So this is one that I listened to again a few months ago when I first listened through this list, and I went back and listened to it this week, and I had the same thoughts, but the direction that those thoughts took me were kind of different the 2 times that I listened to it. That has to do with the cohesiveness of the album, because there are two songs on this album that just absolutely don't belong on this album.
Can't wait to hear which ones because oh god. Okay, go ahead.
So the first few songs are, it's that punk sound, that early punk sound. It's it's
the Stooges.
It's fast, it's fuzzy and distorted, and it's straightforward, and it's early punk. And then you get to We Will Fall, which is 10 minutes long. It's a 10-minute long song on a 30-some minute album. It's
the end of side A, which like that they're sending a message.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
it's a third of the entire, nearly a third of the entire length of this whole album, and it's awesome. It's it's atmospheric, and it's this vibey psychedelic thing, and I really got into it. And then the song Anne, is it the last song? It's towards the end. If it's not the last song, it's towards the end. The song Anne,
track 6 of 8. Yep.
Yeah. It's not nearly as long, but it is more of it's just different. It's this like haunting, not creepy, but haunting, and there's just a lot of like wah and flange on the guitar, and it's a whole lot less of the fuzzy distortion. And those two songs made this album for me, but they aren't what this album is. Like, if this album was a bunch of songs like that, I probably would have given this like a really high score. As it is, as a whole, I still liked it. I still enjoyed this album, but those two songs, it threw me the first time I listened to it, and it threw me the second time I listened to it.
But threw you in a positive way.
In a confused way.
In a confused way. Okay, gotcha. Right.
Positive because I liked those songs. Those were my two favorite songs on the album, but confused because they really just didn't fit with the rest of the album to me. I didn't feel the fit for those songs.
Okay, so that's interesting. Like you, track 2, I Want to Be Your Dog, was the one that I had heard before, and I think it's an interesting commentary on the Stooges. Like I said before, I grew up listening to a lot of classic rock radio, and the Stooges were not on it. Like, they just weren't, which I just think is interesting. So to your point about the psychedelia, originally the band was called the Psychedelic Stooges. So that tracks a little bit. I know that they got a lot of their they pull influences left and right. I mean, they referenced Johnny Cash on a couple of their songs. There's a couple of pulled straight from, hey, we heard this, Jimi Hendrix, we heard this, we liked this, we kept it. Those sorts of things. Like you, those songs were cool. I liked them. Got it. Anne was my favorite song on this album.
Yeah.
And I think for the same reason. My first spin of this one was on Christmas Eve, and I was doing some last minute shopping. Christmas, maybe the 23rd, whatever. I'm a good husband. Anyways, I listened to it, and it's going along, and then Anne comes on, and I was like, what is this? His vocals were definitely in that psychedelic register. And then I loved that it sped up at the end. And then that guitar just is, like you said, fuzzy and unrecognizable and just noisy. Mm-hmm. I played that today. We went sledding, and my oldest daughter was in the back. And she's interested in this project and just think it's cool that we're having videos and podcasts and shit. But so I played it for her, and she's also firmly in an era of liking to watch like The Masked Singer, and she loves musicals and all that stuff. So she's trying to immerse herself in this music world, which is fun. Her notes for this were, he sounds pitchy. He's not a great singer. And I was like, nailed it. Yeah, that's not the strength. And I think 50 years later, right, that's still not the strength. This album's about attitude and noise and just sound, right? That's what it's going for. So to your point, that's why I think Anne really stuck out to me. It's not like a beautiful song. It's just different, and I really liked it. Um, yeah, No Fun. No Fun is a song that Jack White referenced in a video. He did an interview, kind of, he's becoming or is one of those connoisseurs of music in the same way that John Baptiste is from Stay Human. Just he's got such an album of music in his head and full of references, and he can call on almost anything and play almost anything, right? So the interview was asking him about the evolution of blues into rock, and he was playing that classic blues that we're going to talk about some later a little bit, and then like effortlessly he just goes like, well, and then obviously from there you get the Stooges, and he just starts playing No Fun, and you're like, whoa, yes, wow, how did you do that? It's like, in my mind the visual I got was like when you're watching a stage production and the lighting just changes, right? You're still seeing the exact same thing, but the lighting changes and it's just a different mood, and then you're just surprised by it. Like, whoa, that was fast. Like, how did that happen? So it was really cool to listen to him talk about that. I liked it. So you gave this one a 3, you said?
Yeah, I gave it a 3. So a lot of these, as I'm listening to them the second time through, I'm adjusting my scores, but I went with a 3, almost for different reasons, but still ended up at the same spot.
Yeah, I'd give this a 3, maybe a 3.5, because I think I will come back to Anne. I do like the song No Fun. Not right after Anne. I don't know if you've ever had this experience where, and I've definitely noticed on some albums that, there's the first single, and then naturally the second single usually is the track right after the first one, because that's the one that it's like the lead-in, right? Like the first single is the lead-in to the second one, and that just becomes it. So I really liked Not Right, which is the 7th song, just because I heard it the second most. I've listened to Anne probably a dozen times in the last week. I just like, it's just stuck with me, and I was like, yeah, I want to hear it again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I liked it. I'd give this one probably 3.5, leaning towards a 4 actually, which again really surprised me. Like at the start of this, I really thought like I wasn't gonna like this one, but I dug it. So that's the Stooges, self-titled The Stooges.
This next one I don't like.
Right. Henry Rollins is going to hate us.
He can come and get some.
At 487 is Black Flag, their album Damaged. This was released in 1981 on SST Records. It was basically self-produced. That shouldn't come as a shocker as you listen to it. Another short punk album just like the Stooges at just under 35 minutes long, coming from the U.S. We did it. We listened to Black Flag and earned our street cred. Kyle, are you going to claim that street cred, or are you giving it back?
I don't really care to be associated with this album after this.
Oh yeah, yeah. You're just an old head.
Yeah.
Conservative.
Yeah. Square.
Yeah. These punk kids causing all these problems. This is not your bag. All right. Yeah. Tell me more.
All their noise. So I feel like this is a good place to reissue the disclaimer. At least I'm going to say it for myself. Feel free if you want to say the same sort of thing. I'm not a music reviewer. I am not here to pass value judgment on any of these albums. I am just a person who enjoys listening to music and reacting to it. That being said, my reaction to this album was, yikes, no. That's
yikes, no.
And there's nothing wrong with this album if you're into punk. If this is the sort of thing that you are into, especially the hardcore punk stuff, then I could see where this is something that people would like, and especially as an early example of the genre. This is just absolutely not for me. I probably would have pretended to be into this when I was 17, but even then I would have still been lying. But I appreciated the lyrical themes, the rebelliousness of them. But the lyrics themselves were just silly and just juvenile and ridiculous, and
They're supposed to be, Kyle. They're supposed to be.
Maybe, I don't know, but
you just don't get it, man.
I
you just don't get it, Dad.
Yeah,
you wouldn't get it.
Yeah, this is the first album that made me feel like an old man. Yeah, like I don't get it.
This album that came out in 1981 made you feel like an old man. That's amazing.
The music was muddy. Everything was straight down the middle. The vocals were nearly unintelligible. Like I didn't like it. Not for me. I gave it a 1.25, and I feel like that's generous.
But an important 0.25.
I had to give it something. I don't know.
So Black Flag is fronted by Henry Rollins, or at least this iteration of it. I can't remember the details, but anyways, my first exposure to Henry Rollins was early 2000s, like VH1 reaction videos. Remember when they used to pop up and they would interview people? Michael Ian Black was on, comedians and shit. The dude from Anthrax, I can't remember his name, but all those guys.
Scotty Ian.
Yeah, there you go. So that was my first exposure to Henry Rollins. Knew he was supposedly one of the grandfathers of punk rock. Sure. Yeah, I didn't need this record. I didn't need it. Like the songs are short, they move fast, the guitars were crunching, the vocals were menacing. Some of it reminded me of like Andrew WK, like that sort of like you use the word juvenile, but like yes, the like anti-party music, the song TV Party probably had the most cohesive thought in my mind for most of them. The song itself is just like this tongue-in-cheek kind of like everyone's just gonna come over and watch TV, that's so lame, but like we're gonna pretend that that's what we're into, it's just like, again, like just a hater kind of, but that's punk rock for the most part, right? Like that kind of punk rock. We're smarter, you guys are stupid, mainstream sucks. Which my notes for this says, I respect it, its place in the music history, it's just not my thing. And which is funny because now, through my life, I would consider myself a defender of pop punk. This just isn't pop punk. It's not my thing.
No.
I think I gave this a 1.
Totally fair.
If Henry Rollins ever sees this, I'm sorry. I respect it, and it's just not my thing. Just like there's some stuff I like that you'd probably think is lame. So don't beat me up. The album cover for this one, I think it's him, but it's a picture of somebody punching a mirror with the blood. That was just a picture that they did, and they liked it, so they kept it as the album cover. Again,
it's just
very punk rock.
It's so badass.
Badassery. So that was Black Flag's Damaged, a lesson in badassery. That subtitle is our own, by the way. It comes in at 487. Album 486 is John Mayer's Continuum, released on January 16th of 2006 from Aware, which is what do you call it? And what do they call that when there's a sub?
Like an imprint?
An imprint, there you go, which is an imprint of Columbia Records. 49 minutes long, produced by Stephen Jordan and John Mayer out of the U.S. There we go. This is his third album in his discography. Continuum by John Mayer. Kyle, what'd you think?
I'm going to proudly wear my basic white guy badge here and say that to me, this album is a blues and soul masterpiece.
A masterpiece.
I am not using that lightly. So I just on a whole lot of levels for me, in terms of connection, so this album first came out, we were like 21 maybe. I think it came out in like 2006, and I listened to it back then and I enjoyed it back then, but listening to it now again, there's just so much that I connect with now at almost 40. Like there's a strong lyrical content about like themes of aging, of getting older, Gravity is working against me. Stop this train. I want to get off. Dealing with the fact that our parents are getting older, and like respecting their wisdom and their knowledge, but knowing that they won't be around forever. Wanting to live a good and happy and fulfilling life in the face of everything that's trying to tear that down. Like, there's just a whole lot that I connected with this now that I didn't necessarily connect with it when I was younger, when this first came out. And I'm a sucker for the blues and soul. Like, that's what my dad raised me on, was blues music, and that's just always been in my core. And this album just had it. And it was, we had talked last week about that Bonnie Raitt album, Nick of Time, and how one of the things about it was that she really didn't show her guitar chops as much as I had hoped. And that's a pretty common complaint about a lot of blues guitarists. It's a pretty common complaint about John Mayer and about, like Eric Clapton. And you go back, a couple of the two albums before this from John Mayer, they are poppy, singer-songwriter-ish, like, they're not the blues the way this is the blues, and he plays the blues on this album. And to me, that, Slow Dancing in a Burning Room is probably my favorite song out of all of the songs that we've listened to so far, off of all the albums. Like that, it's a powerful song that brings you in and makes you feel it, even if you don't have an actual connection with the song immediately. Like, I've been with my wife for 16 years. I haven't been through a breakup or, anything like that in a very long time, but I felt that song, and I feel that song every time. This is a no skip album for me, and it's a 5. This is my first 5.
Wow, high praise. That is high praise. Good for you. Yeah. So the notes on this one talk about he had considered time a lot in the writing of this album, and it was a theme for him, so it's not surprising that came out in the lyrical content. I think, like you, I heard the singles when they came out. He was held in pretty high regard. Waiting on the World to Change seemed like one of those kind of cheesy, optimistic songs that you hear once in a while, and I was aware of his guitar chops, so to speak. Gravity was another one, one of the singles that caught my ear, but that was just what I would come across on radio. You mentioned being 21. At this time, again, I was firmly in my emo, hardcore scene, so I really wasn't venturing out very much. So I missed this, for the most part. I did hear, and maybe you know this, I know you're a better guitar player than I am. Is Slow Dancing in a Burning Room, is that the one that people talk about being like the crazy hard guitar song of his, or am I thinking of a different one?
I know Neon is the one that I hear most often, being like the impossible John Mayer song to play.
I'll believe you. I recognize that title, and the only thing I could think of was I thought this was the one that people were talking about. The intro to Slow Dancing in a Burning Room is just hard to play. So I could be wrong. I don't know. To hear you give it a 5 is interesting. I did not register with this one really at all, except for Bold as Love, which is a Jimi Hendrix cover. And I don't know if you noticed this. If this is a 5, then you've listened to this album a lot. And this is probably more telling of me as a music fan and a casual hobby musician. I think, like you, I taught myself to play guitar mostly by ear, looking at tabs and figuring stuff out. But ultimately, like my Elmira City Schools music education really taught me to have a good ear and be able to hear things and piece them out. Anyways, the downside to that is I can't write my own music because as soon as I start playing something or creating something, all I can do is hear somebody else's.
Mm-hmm.
And this song, it was like a lightning bolt. It was like, this is Tuesdays Gone by Lynyrd Skynyrd. And I challenge you, I think I ruined that guitar solo for you because you're going to hear that from now on. And there's the phrase in Tuesdays Gone in that lead guitar part where at the end it drops down to the lowest note in the melody. That note isn't there. That's the last one in that little phrase, and he plays it like a step or two higher, and then he goes on and does something else. But it is Tuesdays Gone by Skynyrd, which I'm okay with. Like that's another kick-ass song. So hey, if that's your reference material, then go for it. But yeah, he should have given some writer credits for that little phrase there.
Yeah, as much as I've listened to this album, I haven't picked that up. But now that you say that, I'll have to go back and listen. And it's always interesting too. I wonder how much of it is, and I wouldn't even begin to presume to guess, but how much of it is, there's no such thing as there's no room for originality left anymore because everything has been done, versus like maybe it was even just a nod to Skynyrd.
Sure,
But-
and I don't want to sound like a crank on that either. Like
Right.
I don't care. Like
Right.
like I said, that's a great song, so go for it. Yeah, that I thought that was interesting. This album, let me see here. This album won 2 Grammys for Best Pop Vocal Album and Best Male Pop Vocal for Waiting on the World to Change. It sold very well, not surprisingly. It did very well. It was on all sorts of charts. I mean, it went 4 times platinum in the U.S. Again, it went platinum in many other countries. To go platinum in Denmark, trivia of the day, you have to sell 20,000 copies. So it went 3 times platinum in Denmark. It sold very, very well. It went as high as 7th on the Billboard charts. And the U.S. top rock albums. No, I take that back. It went as high as number 1 on the U.S. top rock albums, according to Wikipedia, and went as high as number 2 on the U.S. Billboard 200. So it charted well. I think that was probably largely on the back of Waiting on the World to Change. That one was all over the place. Like I said, that just was a very optimistic song, and he did a thing. He sold some records. Good for him.
Yeah. I feel like this is the album that made people aware of him, made people beyond like top 40
Definitely.
pop music aware of him, made people realize that he's not just Your Body is a Wonderland, and he is.
Oh, I didn't even did that song come out first?
Yeah, that was before this. So this is what moved him
Forgot
into
about that.
like, because after this, with this album, he did more with the John Mayer Trio, which was just a blues band. And now playing with Dead and Company and things like that. I think this is the album that kind of, I don't want to say put him on the map. He was already on the map, but
I know what you mean.
made other people aware of him.
Yeah, definitely. So you scored it a 5. Let's see. I scored it not a 5. I scored it a 3. It's okay to me. I'm gonna hear those songs. And go, yep, there's John Mayer. I don't need to revisit it for the most part. Now that being said, I'm a lyrics last guy, so it would take a long time for the lyrics to get me. But I do appreciate the music, and I think if I put it into my rotation more, I would gravitate to it. This is not offensive. I appreciate it. I think it would grow on me. It's just not something that I spin a lot. So great. That was John Mayer's album Continuum. Next on the list is number 485, Richard and Linda Thompson's I Want to See the Bright Lights Tonight, released on April 30th, 1974 on Island Records, self-produced out of the UK, coming in at 36 minutes and 55 seconds. Kyle, did you want to see the Bright Lights Tonight?
I I did actually. I didn't know that going into it, but by the end of it, I did. I was pretty happy to check out those bright lights. It was. I'm not a big folk music person, so I wasn't sure what to expect. I mean, I didn't know the names. I didn't know even what genre to expect going into this, and turns out it was kind of generally like that 70s folk music style, but what I appreciated about it, so they're British, right? British, Scottish. You can
Careful, if they're Irish, you just offended a whole bunch of people.
Yeah, well, there was a whole lot of, English folk music infused into it that made it really interesting to listen to beyond just traditional, modern folk music that I just usually find kind of dull and not always all that exciting and fun to listen to. This was, the thing that I was thinking the whole time was that this is a beautiful painting of like a really depressing scene. Like it's really a beautiful album, but the content of it is, it's this sharing the reality of, the downtrodden and desperate class of people that they would see, right? It makes you feel and understand and empathize with, like the addicts and the poverty stricken people that they are encountering. But it's different because it doesn't really put you in their shoes. You can see their world, but not necessarily through their eyes. You see it through like Richard and Linda Thompson's eyes. And it was almost like they were there before and are telling the story of these people now. So it was like this lonely and haunting and desperate album that really kind of hit me hard at a lot of points. But what made it beautiful was the music, the arrangements. Like there was just a lot. It was understated, but it did a lot. Like their voices worked so well together. That mix of, modern folk music with traditional English folk music. It was, I don't want to say soothing, but it just sounded really, really good. I mean, I would be listening to it and suddenly they'd be like, oh, there's a tuba in there. There's a piano and an organ and acoustic guitar, electric guitar, all mixed in and sounding good and coming together well. So I didn't know what to expect going into this album and was very happy with it afterwards. And this is another one that I've gone back to multiple times since first listening to it to re-listen.
Yeah, I mean, like you, I didn't know anything about this. This is the first time I'd heard of it. Didn't know the genre, but I think pretty quickly I was able to place it. I was most impressed by their vocals working together, especially that low baritone that he's got on some of the songs. I think Down Where the Drunkards Roll was where I noticed it most.
Yep.
That was just cool. I mean, he's exploring the depths, which I can appreciate. This album was re-released in 2004 with some bonus tracks, some live tracks, and Cavalry Cross, which is the second track on the proper album, it was released as a live one, and I was at work listening to that, and that one caught my ear quite a bit. Where on first listen, I didn't catch it, but I really liked that one. And it's a really great live recording. I mean, it doesn't, there's no, that I caught, there's no audience sound. I mean, it's really well, it's just a really solid live recording. So I don't think it was a lot different than the original. I just appreciated it. Yeah, my notes on this one, like you, I revisited this one a few times. This is probably the one I revisited most, and I think it's because at first listen, it didn't catch me. Mm-hmm. So I really wanted to give it an honest try. So yeah, I really like Down Where the Drunkards Roll. Um, We Sing Hallelujah was cool. That had some time changes in it that were interesting to listen to. Fun to kind of try to count along with. Also, there's kazoos. I think, like,
Yep.
I don't know, it sounded like kazoos. That was just fun.
Yep.
But yeah, Calvary Cross Live was my favorite one of this album. What did you score it?
I went with a 4 out of 5 on this one.
Yeah,
Again, kind of a surprising album for me.
yeah. I mean, this was one that when it was released didn't really get much notability. It's one of the notes says that the album was originally titled Hokey Pokey, which they went on to name their later album that. I don't know why. And it wasn't released when it was intended to be, because of a vinyl shortage in the mid 70s, which I think was just kind of interesting. But yeah, this one I saw when I was reading up on it. Kurt Loder from MTV Lore said that this is one of his favorites, at least, and he said that there are no misses on this album. That front to back, it's a perfect album. Obviously, he's got a much different history with it than we do, but I respect the opinion. I gave this one, I think, a 3, in that I would revisit some of them once in a while, but not something that I would regularly seek out.
Right.
But those are my thoughts. It's a pretty little album.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I liked it. Number 484 is Lady Gaga's Born This Way. I don't know if you've ever heard this one, Kyle. This one might be new to you. Not sure if you're a big Gaga fan. This one was released on May 23rd of 2011, which seems like ages ago. These songs do not seem that old in my memory. It was released on Interscope Records, produced by many, many people out of the US of A. It comes in at just over an hour. Kyle, are you a monster? Is she mother or no?
So I knew a couple of the songs, the hits, the singles from this album, but I honestly have never spent any time with Lady Gaga before this, other than what would come on the radio or in my wife's car or something like that. And I was rocking the hell out to the first like 3 or 4 songs. Like I was into it. It kind of plateaued for me at that point, and then actually even like dipped off the last couple of songs. Like I was ready to give this an easy 4 after the first 3 or 4 songs. Like 4 pushing 5. Like I loved the lyrical themes. I loved the ideas of self-acceptance and embracing your identity and being who you are and all of that going on. Government Hooker I really like, I enjoyed that song a lot. It had like this industrial tinge that kind of hooked me. It felt dark and a little dangerous, and the themes of women's empowerment was appreciated. The first few songs really had me going. It didn't sustain me though. It didn't carry through to the point where I was still ready to give it that 4 or 5 by the end of the album. I think we talked a little bit about this last week. You and I, that song, I had heard that song probably 100 times before listening to this album, but I didn't know that it was Lady Gaga. That song, and we had talked about this last week because we were talking about Mutt Lange, the producer. Mm-hmm. So I always figured that song, not knowing who it was, that You and I had always just assumed it was some country crossover song, because it feels like a country song to me. It feels like a country crossover song to me. And then I got to that song on this album, and I was like, oh God, that's her. Like, this is a Lady Gaga song. And then I looked into it.
You're disappointed?
I was disappointed because I hate that song. Like, I
hate that song?
I can't stand that song. I don't.
Oh my
I
God.
can't stand that song. And then I looked into it, and it was produced by Mutt Lange, who was Shania Twain's husband and producer, and does a lot with like that country crossover genre. I was like, yeah, well, that makes sense. That's why it felt like a country song to me. I can't stand that song, and maybe it's personal. Maybe it's
shocked.
just like, I don't know. Maybe it was just an overplayed thing that just drove me nuts. But I can't stand that song. And then I think that's what maybe colored the last few songs for me, because I think it is towards the end of the album, if I'm remembering.
Yeah, second to last.
The first three songs, I was in. I was 3 or 4 songs. I was in. I loved it. I was ready to give it a really good score. It kind of plateaued in the middle. The last couple of songs, I was like, it was all right. And then You and I said, nope. But
All right.
to saying all that, overall, I liked it. Like I don't want to come off overly harsh because of that one song that I can't stand. But overall, I kind of liked it.
Are you done? This album kills from start to finish. Get over yourself. No. I don't think it necessarily plateaus. I think that it starts strong, it dips, and then it comes back. All right. Now, that being said, the middle songs I've gained more appreciation for recently, and for strange reasons. The song Bloody Mary, I don't remember if it was included in or it was just like a TikTok thing, but when the show Wednesday came out like a year and a half ago, I can't remember, two Halloweens ago, I don't remember. There's a sped up, or there are sped up versions of that song that are really fun. That was my first exposure to that. I didn't know it was a Lady Gaga song to begin with. And when I say sped up, I mean like the whole thing, vocal, pitch, everything is sped up, which was just really fun. So my daughters and I would listen to those a lot. So it's a little jarring to hear the original version because it just feels like it drags to me, just because I'm used to the fast version. What you said about the lyrical content, yeah, I can get down with that. I appreciate that. No arguments there. But I do think that like a song like Hair, it's silly to me because the lyrics don't resonate with me for the same way that they would resonate with others, right? So I'm just left with, this is a silly song. Like, okay, this is just silly. Let's move on. But anytime Lady Gaga sings in a foreign language, I'm there for it. I mean, so to hear her German, I don't speak German, like to hear that, I was in. That's just fun.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine that it's probably a pretty good accent. I could not agree with you. I could not disagree with you more on You and I.
Really?
The end of that song, like, from the part where she shouts out Nebraska for inexplicable reasons, that song rocks. Like, the whole end, the vocals, the guitar, everything. Mutt Lange deserves a Grammy and more for that. I don't care. There's, like, that is an intentional move, right? That is an intentional move. You don't bring in Mutt Lange to subtly reference country crossover. You bring in Mutt Lange to sell it.
Yeah,
I'm going all in. And I think she did. It was great. The Edge of Glory is a great song at the end too. Again, it's a little bit cheesy to me, but it's a great one. I agree that the album starts off well. Having defended this album to the extent that I just have is surprising to me.
I'm gonna laugh if we gave it the same score.
Right. Okay. Let me bring that information up. And I fully... Okay, what did you score it?
I gave it a 3.
I gave it a 4.
Okay.
So, all right,
Okay,
good. Then
yeah.
at least we're not crazy. I gave it a 4. I stand by it. This album was all over the place. This was her... Where was this in her discography? This was her second album. And it was interesting. I know she started off... My first exposure to her was... She was on that... I think it was Akon. On that Akon song that was on the radio. So I was surprised when I spun this again at how dancey it was. I didn't, and she's gone on to do a lot of stuff, much less dancey. So I was surprised about that. This song, or I'm sorry, this album won a lot of awards. It sold a ton of records. It's pretty impressive. I mean, this is on the decade end charts. It's nuts. This is a 4-time platinum album in 2011, post Napster, mid LimeWire. Still sold 4 million units. Platinum. I mean, this is when I've looked at other notes on this stuff. There's sometimes maybe 5 or 6 countries. There's more than I can count on this one. This charted everywhere. It was on. I mean, I'm looking at the top charts peak position. There's probably 30 countries, and only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 by quick count aren't number one peak position, and of those 9, 7 of them are single digits. So like it flew.
Oh yeah.
It flew.
I'll be interested to see, and I haven't looked ahead really, at least not too specifically. I'll be interested to see if there's more Lady Gaga on this top 500 albums.
I hope there is, because I also noted that these are not her best songs. I mean, a lot of these are good songs. They're not her best songs.
Right.
So, I'm curious. Again, I don't know if you've said this. I haven't looked ahead. I've only seen the first 50. So I don't know what is to come. I don't know if there's other Lady Gaga albums on this, but this is a great, if there's not, this is a great case study for you can have amazing songs that are on so-so records that don't get put on lists this way. Those songs might be on lists of the best songs of whatever. But an album's an album, man. Like, if it's not hey, your rubric holds up. So, yeah, I dug it. Gaga for life. All right, in at 483 is Muddy Waters, simply titled The Anthology. If that doesn't tell a story, I don't know what will. This album is 2 hours and 27 minutes, released in August 28th of 2001. That is 18 years after he's passed. 2001, from Chess MCA Records, produced by Leonard Chess, released out of the US of A. What were your thoughts on Muddy Waters, Kyle, you blues guitarist aficionado?
Yeah, I mean, like we talked about with John Mayer, I was raised on the blues. That was my dad's thing that he brought me up with. So this was interesting for me to listen to. The older blues style, especially the early part of his career, where it was mostly just him playing and singing, maybe with a bass in the background holding something down. I enjoyed listening through the progression of his career over these albums. Again, though, these anthologies are a bit much. Like, every multi-disc anthology album that we've had so far, I keep coming back to, like, I could have gotten the picture in one disc. Like, this could have been an email. Like, I enjoyed it. There wasn't a lot on here that I didn't like. I liked a lot of it. But at the same time, it kind of, like, I wrote down my favorite song and my least favorite song, and for both of them, I just wrote down, I don't know. They kind of started to run together. Like,
Yes.
that was the big thing that I got out of it. I enjoyed the first disc, and I enjoyed even the later disc where it was more than just him playing and singing. It had, full band, and there was much more going on. And you can even listen through and hear his band get tighter and better and more together as it goes through. And that was interesting. It was cool to listen to. Again, though, it was 2 hours and some odd minutes that I didn't need it to be that long. But it was good. It was good.
Yeah. Muddy Waters, born McKinley Morganfield, born in 1913 on a plantation outside of Mississippi. Says he grew up playing the guitar and harmonica, and like you said in the early recordings, that tracks. It's pretty much a solo endeavor. And that's one of the things that stuck out with me. I don't have the history with blues as you do, but the songs literally ran together for me. I had this on shuffle, and I could not tell where one ended and one started. Mm-hmm. I think it's important. You said it, I'll say it. I'm not reviewing the album or the music. This is just my experience listening to it. It all just blended together. So really none of them really stuck out to me. I'm interested what song was your favorite, because there's a lot of songs. What was your favorite?
I really didn't write one down.
No,
I mean, I had favorite and least favorite song written down, and by the end of it, I just wrote down, I don't know. They all ran together.
Oh, there you go.
Like that. I mean, that's
illustrates the
literally,
point.
yeah, that's literally what I had written down here. It could have been all one long song, and it was a good song, but it was a super long one.
A super long song, 2.5 hours. Yeah. I think this is one of those that would probably fall into the most important categories. I mean, this is definitely a collection of Americana music that would go on to influence hundreds of artists moving forward. Interestingly, when Rolling Stone released their first rankings, this album was number 38 in 2003, and it has fallen to 483. Now, previously I mentioned that Phil Spector probably took the biggest fall. It appears that Muddy Waters actually did, because he was ranked some 30, or I forget exactly, a number of spots higher than Phil Spector was, which naturally begs the question, Kyle, did Muddy Waters kill a guy? Because I can't figure out why it would fall that far. I do know, again, that when they talk about what went into ranking, they brought in more contemporary artists to weigh in on some of this stuff. So my only thought would be that with more contemporary artists, I mean, Billie Eilish was on the last panel that ranked the last rankings. And that's not to say that Billie Eilish is not a Muddy Waters fan. She very well could be. I could see a reality where some of the contemporary artists or producers or music critics or whatever that were brought in just don't hold it in such high regard. So the album fell quite a bit. It doesn't mean it's not any less important. Did you rank this one?
I gave it a 3. Again, I mean, I feel like if this had been a single disc, I would have given it at least a 4. But that's not to take away from it's not to take away from the music and the impact and the influence of the music. It's just my experience of listening to this anthology. It was,
for all the reasons we just said, and if anyone's listening and they want to come for me for not doing this with fidelity, this was a too long didn't read anthology for me. Again, I listened to it a couple times on shuffle, couldn't tell the difference, felt like I understood what it was. I moved on. So I would give this one maybe a 2.5. And the reason for the half, I guess, is a respect sort of thing, because I understand its importance. It just doesn't resonate with me. So that's what it is. That was the Muddy Waters anthology. Coming in at 482 is The Pharcyde's album Bizarre Ride to the Pharcyde, or maybe if you styled it correctly, Bizarre Ride to the Pharcyde. Anyways, this album was released on November 24th, 1992. It comes in at 56 minutes long from Delicious Vinyl Records, produced by Jay Swift, LAJ, and Slim Kid 3. Wonder if he was the third born. Kyle, did you like early 90s hip hop?
I didn't know I did, but I guess I do.
Uh-huh.
So I've said it before, and I'm probably going to repeat this 100 times, but one of the reasons that I wanted to do this, listening through this list of albums, is so that I could hear things that I wouldn't have exposed myself to otherwise, or had known about otherwise, as the case is with this album. I didn't know that this album existed. I didn't know this group existed. And I'm glad to have listened to it. But I don't have much of a reference point for it. Like one of my big blind spots in my, musical palette is hip hop and, rap and other adjacent genres. It's just not something that I ever really have spent a lot of time with. I mean, I know some of the big artists from like when we were in high school and college and that sort of thing, and even some of the more recent people, but even then it's more, I know the names, like I know who some of them are, but I couldn't pick out their music. So my frame of reference for this album was pretty limited, and going into it I didn't really know what it was going to be, and I ended up kind of getting into it. I enjoyed it. Like, it was at times kind of silly and, sophomoric and juvenile, but I think that was kind of the point, right? Like, I think it was supposed to be fun. It was not supposed to be super serious. And it didn't take itself seriously, and I thought that was awesome. And production-wise, it was, to me, from my, again, limited frame of reference, it was an early 90s nostalgic ride of hip-hop songs. Like, I felt like I was listening to early 90s hip-hop. I mean, that's exactly what it was, but I felt that, and I kind of loved it. Like, the music of it, like the sounds were great, the turntables, the samples, the drums. I liked it. I liked the cadence of their rapping. I liked it. Yeah. There was some of it that I was listening to it and I was like, I don't know if that aged very well. But
certainly not.
Yeah. But overall,
none of the 90s did.
Yeah. What was the song where they prank call the girl? I forget what that one was, but yeah, I was like, yeah, this is probably not wouldn't fly today very well. But yeah, I mean, I liked it.
To that end, the song Yamama is basically 4 minutes and 22 seconds of Yamama jokes, which is fun. Just shit talking back and forth. Yeah, the sing-songy delivery of that early 90s, late 80s, well, most early hip-hop, I guess, much early hip-hop, definitely showed through on this one. One of the things that I liked about this was the sample of multi-instrumental works, like that jazz influence that I know we're going to see again pop up on this list, because there's no way Tribe Called Quest is not on this list somewhere. And to me, it sounds like I have more exposure to hip-hop in general than you do, but it's not much more. So when I heard some of these for the first time, my reference was this sounds similar to some Tribe Called Quest stuff in the use of those sort of jazzy samples, which I appreciated, rather than just the traditional kind of breakbeat. Here's 8 bars or 4 bars of a beat, and that's gonna ride for the track. So I appreciated that. Yeah, I thought it was funny. Of note, Kanye West is on record saying that this is one of, if not his favorite albums of all time, which I thought was interesting, and I would be interested to know more about why that is. I wonder what he likes about it as most, and it could just be that this is an album he kind of grew up with and just resonated with him. I don't know. but it'd be interesting to hear more about that. But yeah, my initial thoughts, because I listened to this for the first time on Christmas night. I think as most people would. As I was, putting the finishing touches on cleaning up the boxes and getting everything back in order, my memory of this album will be me going in and out of my front door in the cold, throwing things away. So my first reaction was just, I don't have much context for this. But I mean, I already said it. I appreciate the samples. I can appreciate the work. I thought it was all right. Would you rank it?
I went with a 3.5. I went 3.5, and I was interested at first in when it came out, because I almost wondered, and I don't think the timeline lines up like I was thinking in my head, when rap and hip hop got real serious in the later 90s, maybe, mid to later 90s, the East Coast, West Coast stuff that was going on, Biggie and Tupac and that sort of thing. Whereas this was kind of like, hey, we're just having fun making this music. But it doesn't line up time-wise like that. But that was what kind of stuck with me just thematically, was that it didn't take itself too seriously. It was having fun, and I had fun with it. So yeah, 3.5.
Yeah, I had fun with it. It's again one of those that I don't know that I'll come back to very often. There's a couple songs that I could see like showing to someone, like, just, hey, this is funny, check this out. Yeah, I'd give it a 3. It was all right. I'm glad I heard it. We're better for it.
Not playing it for my kids though.
Facts. All right. Number 481, Belle and Sebastian's album If You're Feeling Sinister was released in 1996, we said?
Yep.
Yeah, 1996. Another November record. Produced by Tony Dugan on Jeepster Records, out of the UK, Scotland to be specific. 41 minutes long from Belle and Sebastian. How about I lead this one off with a hot take?
You go right ahead. Let's hear it.
All right. There is neither a Belle nor a Sebastian in this band. It is a group of Scottish lads that got together and put together some chamber pop, chamber folk, indie rock, indie pop, or twee pop, which I'm not really familiar with, but they threw this album together. This album is their second LP. I thought it was incredibly boring. Now, that was when I thought, out of ignorance, that it literally was just a guy and a girl with some other musicians. Now that I know that it's a full band that presumably come with all the power and skill of Scottish musicians that came before and after them, what the hell are we doing? This was just boring. I've said before, I'm a lyrics-less person. Maybe the lyrics are amazing and that's what people love, because it sure as shit ain't the music in this one. I didn't like it. That's the understatement of the year. That's all that, and then I come up with, I didn't like it. I don't get it. I know that there are hipsters everywhere that say they love Belle and Sebastian. I don't believe them. I don't believe them. In fact, my friend Sarah, I know, has mentioned that she likes Belle and Sebastian. Sarah, you're a liar. No one likes Belle and Sebastian. You just listen to it. It's like the Wonder Years have a song where they say I'm gonna misquote it, but it's something along like, saying you like the rain isn't your personality, right? Saying you like Belle and Sebastian isn't your personality. It's just not. Sorry. Put on a proper album and listen to that. Anyways, Kyle, what did you think?
This was one. So I got to think back, but I think so far every album that I had when I initially started listening to this list, every album that I listened to and then came back and re-listened to, and it made me adjust my score. It made me adjust it up. Like I adjusted a few things up. Like that Far Side album, I had initially given it a 3, and I listened to it again a couple months later, and I bumped it up a little bit. This album, I bumped it down.
As you should.
When I first listened to it, I wasn't in the mood for it. And by the second or third song, it put me in the mood for it. So I appreciated that. I didn't dislike it, and I still don't dislike it, actually. I mean, I'm okay with it. My adjustment went from liking it to just being okay with it, though. Like, to me, it's okay. I feel now like this is the precursor to like the Arcade Fire 2000s indie pop stuff, or indie rock stuff that I just don't like. Like, we talked earlier about the Stooges and how I was saying, the Stooges were the cool sound, and then a lot of things came after that like were copying the cool sound, and it just gets overdone, and it's a caricature, it's a facsimile of the original thing. I feel like this, and maybe this isn't even the original cool indie sound, but it's a little bit closer to that, where the later stuff, like the indie rock of the 2000s, is the caricature, like not good, at least to me personally, my own personal preference. But this album on re-listen became a lot more boring. Like,
yes,
it was,
you saw the light.
It was still pleasing to listen to, though. Like, on headphones, just sitting here listening to it, it was pleasing to my ears, and I enjoyed it, and that's why I think I'm still okay with it. But one of the things that I didn't like about it is that I felt like the vocals felt out of time with the music. Like the vocals felt very frenetic at times, like very fast paced, like rushed. And I don't know if that was an intentional, like, artistic choice, but to me, it made the songs feel a little anxious, and the songs themselves didn't necessarily feel that way. So it kind of took me out of it. But yeah, it wasn't, it didn't hit me as hard the second time as it did the first time.
I don't want to beat the same drum, but I just saw that in 2013 there was a documentary made about this album. Why?
This is going to be one. This is going to be one that people come after us for.
I hope so. Bring it. You were talking about the influences. Tom Brahan from Stereogum, reflecting on it 20 years later, claimed that Sinister could be, quote, too influential, unquote. Despite, he says, like, it took a long time for Belle and Sebastian to catch on, but when they did, like, a lot of bands gravitated to them. He says that he saw the band's timidity taken. I don't know what that means. Anyways, it was introduced to a new audience in U.S. college kids. They cite that bands like Death Cab, Sufjan Stevens, the Decemberists. So exactly, like, you hit the nail on the head. Like, that indie wave that came up at that point, like, definitely called on Belle and Sebastian as an influence. And yeah, and honestly, it's interesting seeing this because those three, Death Cab, Decemberists, and Sufjan Stevens, I can never get into them. I think Death Cab is the same. It's just, I don't like it. It's, I what you said about, like, the songs, they're pretty, but there's nothing in there that makes me want to listen to it again. It's just bleak, gray, and I like bleak music, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's some bleak stuff that I listen to. What I mean, I guess, is just the sound of it. It's just not, there's nothing there for me. I don't, Again, I defy anyone who says they're a Bell and Sebastian fan to name another band they like, and have that be in the same vein. I don't believe them. I just don't. I gave it a 2. It's not a 1. It's not a 1. I respect it. Yeah, I respect it. Sure, it sounds like I respect it. Absolutely. This album can take a hike. Anyways, anything else on Bell and Sebastian, or did we
No,
sufficiently kick their ass?
I mean, I gave it a 3, so it's not
Oh,
and that's down from a 4.
and that's
down from a.
You gave it a 4. You were
I
smoking
did.
crack.
I enjoyed it the first time I listened to it. I don't know what it was. I would like to go back to that first listen and hear what I heard that first time, because I didn't hear it when I listened to it again.
I would like to go back to that first listen and kick that Kyle's ass. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was Bell and Sebastian's. If you're feeling sinister, a little spicy on that one. Yeah. So Kyle, that takes us through the first 20 albums.
Yeah.
Any thoughts so far? Oh, we got to do our segment. I've got one better.
Yeah.
Did you think of one for this one?
I did.
Good. Okay. All right. We're going to end this episode with our recurring segment. I've got one better, where we pick one of the 10 albums we just reviewed, and call on our internal catalog and say, yeah, if it was up to me, I'd replace this with that. So Kyle, what's your pick for You've Got One Better this week?
All right. So I think since it was one that we both were kind of hard on tonight, so I think my I Got One Better is for that Bell and Sebastian album. And I would say the album Tallahassee by the Mountain Goats is better than If You're Feeling Sinister by Bell and Sebastian. Same sort of indie rock feel, but the Mountain Goats just bring it. And they bring it in they've got like 30 albums under their belt at this point, and they bring it on almost every single one of them. And Tallahassee, it's from the early 2000s, and it's just top tier. It's good stuff. If you think you like that Bell and Sebastian album, or you wanted to like that Bell and Sebastian album but you didn't, which is kind of me, try Tallahassee by the Mountain Goats.
All right, my pick for I've Got One Better this week. I'm glad I let you go first because I didn't have to pick on Bell and Sebastian anymore. But I think this one would also fit because it is a male and female who I thought would have been Bell and Sebastian. But we gave some love to Richard and Linda Thompson, deservedly so. But I think there's an album that's better than that one. And this is one, I don't know if these types of albums are permitted on the list or on there at all. But this is the album Once, music from the motion picture, from the soundtrack of the movie by the same name, from Glenn Hansard and Marketa Erglova. I don't know if you ever heard that one, Kyle?
No, it's not.
I bet you've probably heard their song Falling Slowly, which was like the I don't know if it was a single, but it was the song. It was nominated, if not won a Grammy. I don't remember. It was definitely nominated. Not a Grammy. An Oscar. I think it was nominated for an Oscar. But that's very much a singer-songwriter album. I think Falling Slowly alone would carry that album past Richard and Linda Thompson, in my opinion. I'm sure that they were influenced by them. But that came out in 2007 or so. It's an indie movie. You should check it out. It's interesting in that the soundtrack plays prominently within the movie because the movie is the story of the struggling busker musician that happens upon this immigrant woman who I forget a lot of the details, but like he finds out that she can sing, and so they write some songs together, and it follows that kind of arc. So it is a very much like life imitates art imitates life sort of thing. But the songs are better. There's some goofy ones on there, but I'd definitely check that one out. It's better. It's definitely better than Bell and Sebastian. I think it might be better than Richard and Linda Thompson. That's my pick for this week. That's Once, music from the motion picture.
Hey, thanks for watching. We'd love to hear what you think of these albums, so let us know in the comments. Do you approve these grooves? And as always, a quick thumbs up helps a lot. Subscribe so you can see all 500 albums, and we'll see you on the next record.